Hey everyone, it's Robin, Artisan and Crafts, and welcome to my studio. In a recent video, I was talking about how I should start burying my threads when I'm working on this scissors quilt. And that's because I am stitching in the centers here. And one of you guys wanted to know how I bury my threads. You didn't quite understand. And it is so much easier to show in a video than it is to try to put it in words. What I did at first is I just backstitched. Now when you backstitch, you have these little extra bits where you can see that the thread's thicker, and sometimes it pops out and you'll get some loose threads, and it could make your quilting actually come loose. This project is for me. Yes, I could fix any issues, but I thought it would probably be in my best interest not necessarily to practice doing this, because I've done it many times and I do it regularly, but to actually get into the habit. Now I'm using it on this quilt, but I've also used it in my bag making. If I'm working on a bag and something happens, if I'm sewing in the zipper and I've run out of bobbin or my thread breaks, I like to go ahead and bury my threads so that you don't see that back stitching and it becomes a continuous line. So I went ahead and I just did one little round here. Now I am doing not precise straight stitching, and I didn't want a spiral here. So to bury my threads, I will have the start and stop of 1, 2, 3 of my little consecutive lines here. A spiral would work, but I like more of the geometric. So on this one, I only did one so that we can see it easily. Maybe yellow might not have been the best one to work on, but it was the next one in line. So these two threads right here are my beginning threads. When I begin the quilting line, I put my presser foot down, I drop my needle to the bottom, and I hold on to the top thread, and I bring the needle back up, and that brings my bobbin thread up to the top. So I have two. But when I finish it, I left a long thread. I have one on the top and one on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to, for this one, since I have these threads on the top, I'm going to bring the bobbin thread to the top of the quilt so that I can bury the threads here on the top. This is another thing that's helpful. If you were quilting this and you got to right about there and you forgot to check your bobbin and it ran out, you're going to have the same situation just right there, whether you're doing straight lines or free motion or some type of fun design to it. I do try to work my way when quilting to the outside to change my bobbin so I don't have to do this, but it just happens. It's also good if you want to purple thread, yellow thread, blue thread, red thread, you're going to have a lot of ends. Those who hand quilt will also bury their knot in the beginning and then bury their thread at the end. It's similar, but theirs involves a knot. You can go ahead and search on YouTube for how to hand quilt and how to bury the threads in hand quilting, and it'll show you how to do that knot. So I have my needle book. This is one of the needle books I've made in the past with the little felt. This needle book has a special needle in it. The only needles that are in here, to find the one I've been using, are ones that have a little notch on the side. It doesn't have a solid eye. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you. Right there on the side, there's a little notch. It's not a full eye that I can put my threads right into. It goes down like that. There's also a version that has the notch on top, and you put your threads and you pop it through a small opening. But for me, it kind of shreds my thread a little bit because I have to force it through, especially if I want to bury two threads at the same time. I like the one on the side. It helps to keep the thread in there. I don't accidentally pull it out. Let's go ahead and bring this thread to the front. Now that thread is super long. I like to leave them about 5 inches. Now for this one by itself on the back, I can go ahead and just bury it here on the back, but I thought I would show you how to bring it to the front. So this thread here is the one that's all by itself. This is the top thread and the bobbin's in the back. If I pull on this, right here is my bobbin thread. So I can just pull my bobbin to the front, or I could have done the same thing and pulled on the bobbin and brought it to the back. I would have brought the top thread to the back. Now they are coming out in one hole right after the other. Some people will just bury them like that. I like to take just a little knot, like when you tie your shoes, that very first knot, just a single knot, and I like to put a little knot there. So I'll go ahead and do that with both of these. Now this one is super long also, so I can trim these up to match the same size. They don't have to be the same length, but it does make it easier. If I just put one single knot, just over once, that makes it so that they're both coming out of that same location. So I'll take my needle and I can see that the opening is on this side. I put the thread over it, and if I just push down a little bit and run it up the needle, sometimes I grab both, sometimes I don't. My needle is now threaded. And then what I'm going to do, I like to go right down into this hole. You can go right next to it, but I like to just go right into the hole. This is a stitching line, but it's not a quilting line. So I can take this thread and go into the center. And when I do the rest of the quilting, it will lock that thread in place. Or I can go back out this way, whichever one works for you in your project. I'm going to go into the center. Now, I have some white on white, so hopefully it's going to hide my thread plus the stitching. If this was the only stitching line I was doing, I would come out into yellow because I don't want you to be able to see my thread. But I'm going to angle down and try to get into that batting layer. And I can feel it underneath with my finger. And I want to make sure that, see, my needle is starting to come out here. So I went too far deep. So I'll just pull it back out a little bit and make sure that I'm kind of pushing it towards the top while pushing the needle that way. And you can see the needle. So I'll go over and check again, make sure I don't see any needle there. And you can go over as far as you want, depending on how long your thread is. Just go over an inch or two, and that's fine. I can go past that seam if I want and come up a little further. Now I'm going through my seam allowance there, so that's going to also help lock the thread. Then just push it through. And when you pull it, it's going to take the thread that you have right here, and it's going to bury it into the layers of the quilt. And then I just pull it out and make sure both pieces came out. Now to cut the thread, you want to pull up and out a little bit away from where you were stitching. Sometimes I'll let it slide the quilt and bunch it up a little bit. And when I clip this thread, the rest of the thread is going to get sucked back in. And I don't even have to get super close to the quilt in case I worry about cutting it. Now that thread went back in. And when you give it a little bit of iron, you won't see that spot. It's no different than if you pulled out some of your quilting. And that one's buried. So the same thing with this one. This one's super long. I will go ahead and bury this one without tying these two together, just to give you an idea what it looks like. When you're looking at a quilt from a distance, you're really not going to see a lot of these, not mistakes, but different techniques. For me, they're usually a mistake. So then I will just grab the two together, put them in the side. You can thread it through a regular needle. You don't have to have this kind of needle, but it is nice to have, especially if you have issues with shorter threads. I just like the fact that I don't have to work hard. This is a quick way to bury all the threads in your quilt because you might not just have one. I'm going to have 2, 4, 6 times 4. I'm going to have 24 just in these sections. Plus I will have all of these little sections that I'm going to need to bury the threads. So there's going to be a lot. Again, you can just backstitch and leave it on the back, especially if I was quilting it with blue thread. You would never see any of that. It would blend right in. This is a quilt for my sewing room. I can do anything I want because it's up to me. I'm not going to see the back. But if you're the type of person that wants to get it as neat and clean as you can, burying the threads is a good technique to learn, especially as I mentioned, if you run out of bobbin in the middle somewhere, you're going to need to bury those threads. So here is my length. It's in my needle. Now, if I'd had the one that pops in at the end, sometimes when I'm doing like this and making tension on it, it just pulls back out. That's why I like to have this one, because the opening is at the bottom of the eye and the thread will stay up near the top. So then I'll take it again and I'll just find a spot anywhere. I can go back through a hole. I can come over really close. And this time I'm going to wiggle it down through and go into the yellow section. If you already go into a stitch, it's really easy to get your needle in. Now I'm already starting to come up and that's too close and I can see the silver of my needle. So I'm going to, with my finger underneath, if I get stabbed, I get stabbed, it's normal. Just try to make sure that it's staying under there. You could come all the way up here and come out at the top, but I'll just come right to here. Flip it over, check to make sure there's no silver needle. I'm going through the stitching and the seam there, so I might need to give a little extra tug. There we go. Now I lost one of my threads, so that means I'm gonna have to bury the other one. Not a problem, that sometimes happens. Probably more with this side one than if you were just doing it through a regular eye of the needle. But when we do quilting and stuff, the needles are so thin that it's hard to see the eye. So maybe you're having a hard time threading your needles. So there we are there. Check the back. And then just pull, that's the tail end, and just pull it through. So now I have the two. Just put a little bit of tension on them. By going a little bit further away, I know I'm still going to have a long piece in there. So if I give a little tension and I clip 1 and 2, and they're buried. And that's how easy it is to bury your threads. Now when we look at this one, we can see I have that nice stitching line, and when we look on the back, there isn't any double stitching line like I have right there. I think whenever we're working on different crafts, whether it's quilting or something else non-sewing related, it's really good to learn the different tips and tricks and techniques. So if we run into a situation, we can easily remedy it, and we won't have to worry if we have to start all over or pull all the threads out if there's some type of an issue. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today and for asking these wonderful questions. I'm glad I can help show how I do things. And I might have another couple of little techniques for you guys to see here. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.